Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 122 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. This week we're speaking with Joseph Granda. He's gone through a lot of changes since his first HitCast appearance a while back. Of course, he's still fighting the culture war, but now he's got some fresh ammo to do it with. Well, Resistance Theater hit a new low this week. First up is the new movie Late Night, a so-called comedy about the first female writer for a female late-night host legend. Emma Thompson is that legend. She's a Carson-esque figure who's been around forever, but her ratings are falling. She doesn't have that same buzz she used to, and she's about to be replaced. So she reaches out to a female writer, an untested talent, played by Mindy Kaling, and hoping that maybe she can reverse her fortunes. And Thompson is really great in this movie. She's kind of hateable, and that's one of the things I liked about her. She's very fresh, very original, and very no apologies in a sense. But part of the problem is that Mindy Kaling's character, a comedy writer, just isn't very funny. One of her signature jokes is political, it's anti-Republican, and it's hopelessly stale. My gosh, is that really kind of showing us how good she is? I think we'll pass, but here's the problem. Mindy Kaling, who also stars and writes in the film, really knows how to make those woke-filled sequences. And of course, the film suffers as a result. I think something similar is going on with The Dead Don't Die. Now, when we heard about this cast, we thought, oh my goodness, a horror comedy with Bill Murray and Adam Driver, Tilda Swinton, Chloe Sevigny, Iggy Pop, Danny Glover. I mean, the list goes on and on. Great cast. And this is Jim Jarmusch, who's kind of an idiosyncratic director, a hipster, an indie kind of guy, but some of his movies are quite good. So how is The Dead Don't Die? Well, it's not so good. There's not many laughs here. The deadpan humor just falls completely to the wayside. The scares, well, they don't really happen. And, of course, you've got a lot of anti-Trump and anti-fracking stuff filling up the screen. I thought that Rachel Maddow was one of the co-directors here. It's that obvious. When I was watching the film, a friend of mine who's pretty left of center leaned over to me and said, "Do you want me to explain this to you?" Yes, it was that heavy-handed, and he was not having any of it, even if it agreed with his worldview. So what does this mean? What's going on here? Well, it's another example of people in the creative community letting their personal politics stain the product. Kaling clearly wants to make a statement with Late Night, and that seemed to lap her creative talents. Jarmusch just wanted to hate on Trump so badly, he actually made the great Steve Buscemi wear a hat in this movie saying, "Make America White Again." Really? Oh. 2019 has been an awful year for movies so far, but Hollywood's insistence on weaponizing its content, it's making matters worse. Here's the HiT tweet of the week. Well, it's Father's Day weekend, so I thought I'd show a kinder, gentler side to the HitCast. How? Well, I'm sharing a tweet from Clerks auteur Kevin Smith. Now, Smith had a heart attack a while back, and ever since then, he's been really loving on life, just very positive, very grateful. When he had when you have one of those life or death experiences, it changes you, and I think it's done so in a very good way for Smith. He just seems like a brighter soul. And in that spirit, and to honor fathers everywhere, I want to share what he wrote on Twitter about his own dad. Dad's been gone 16 years now, but in her bedroom, my mom has this little shrine to him that's just about breaks my heart whenever I see it. I always think of Dad as my old man, but naturally, Mom sees him for what he is, the love of her life. It's kind of perfect, right?
Don't touch that dial. You're listening to my daddy's podcast.
The latest edition of the HiT Artist Spotlight features author John Fulton. John's a homeschool alum who found comfort from 80s films that maybe his mom and dad shouldn't have shown him. I know that feeling. Now he's bringing his curious vision to the printed page via books like The Janitor Must Die, along with some YouTube shorts that are kind of silly, kind of funny, sure to make you smile. Hope you enjoy my conversation with John Fulton. Well, John, first of all, let's start with a kind of a brief intro. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got your creative start. I think we all have different journeys. I know I went to art school back in the day, and that really didn't pan out for me. But hopefully, you're having a better creative journey. But just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm from Oklahoma. My parents are not. They're from Illinois and California, and they kind of moved here so my mom could go to medical school. And they were Christians, and they did some missionary work back in the day. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to have, they ended up homeschooling me. And which sounds like it should have been sheltered, but as I like to put it, the coverage was patchy. My dad, he loved old like 80s and 70s and 90s action movies, and he would bring them in, and he'd start them up, and mom would be like, so have you seen this recently? Do you know what's in it? And he's like, oh yeah, I saw it 15 years ago. Everything will be fine. And then about an hour in, there'd be a sex scene or something, or we'd be at F-bomb number 20, and he'd be like, yeah, I forgot about that. But ultimately I think that was a good thing, because it taught me, that there were other things in the world. It gave me a chance to, because I started from a position where my parents got to choose a little bit more what the position I was starting from. I knew what they believed, and I knew what the outside world was like. I had kind of this, I could see the zeitgeist kind of just from a little bit outside it. Mm-hmm. And that made things very interesting, because I had to decide what I believed. And so they put a lot of effort into teaching me how to think, and not what to think, how to think. And there's a big difference. Yeah. And when it came to art, it was just those movies. I loved those movies. And I loved, especially, they didn't start us with the R-rated movies. That's just the funniest example I could think of. But, they started us way back in the beginning. I don't remember whose idea it was to show us Star Wars, because it was so long ago. And but I just remember watching that, and as, whatever, a 5-year-old, and Han Solo goes into carbonite, and you go, ah! And then he comes back in the next movie, yay! And it was such a, I remember just having this really intense understanding that there was something about this that, even though it wasn't 100% real, it described something that was real. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to know what that was. I wanted to know what that was so much.
By the way, I think if I had a nickel for every creative soul who was touched in that way by Star Wars, I'd be a millionaire, because it's such a common refrain. And
yes.
It's for younger people, older people. It's just such a touchstone for people, and when they even think about being a creative person, that they reach out to Star Wars. It really begins there for multiple generations. Well, tell me a little bit about your YouTube channel, which is obviously kind of goofy, kind of funny. It's sort of snarky in a way. Tell me about it, and also it sounds like that you get a bit of traffic from it.
It does, and I think the big thing about YouTube is just, even before YouTube existed, I wanted to make films. I was making, like, even when it was just the family watching them, just like, my homeschool group or whatever. We made a movie called with my younger brother called Oklahoma Mitchell and the Holy Male, which is, of course, the only way it works is that it is so tongue in cheek that that it's like Deadpool-esque, and or out, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and you just starred, my brothers and some friends of ours, and we just went out into the woods. I live on 5 acres of woods, so that helped, and we just shot it like out in the middle of the summer, and showed it to their church. And we showed it at their church one evening, and I remember, it is such a crappy movie. It really is. But I can accept that, because, you learn, and as an artist, that's just what you do. You have to accept that you got to do the bad thing first before you can get to the good thing. And that was my justification, was basically that the more is that you have to get it out of your system before you get to Hollywood, in a way, otherwise you just end up doing it there.
Well, I think it's like a stand-up comedian who needs to do the reps and needs to bomb once in a while
Yeah.
he or she is established. I mean, you got to kind of go through those paces, and it's really informative and it hurts. So, but that's it.
Yes, but sorry. But you also need a little taste of success so that you know that it's worth going on. And I remember I got to the end and I was cringing kind of through the whole thing. Every now and then someone would laugh, it was a good feeling. But every now and then I'd see something and I would go, I can't do it. And then at the end, everybody just threw their arms up and just went, whoa! And I went, oh, wow. I had no idea that was what you felt. And after that, I was hooked. I had to do more. And we just did it all through, I don't know, we must have made 25 little short, terrible films just running around on the hill. And the best of them so far is what's ended up on YouTube. So which ones have you seen?
Well, I saw some of the military ones, which I thought were fun. And, I grew up wanting to animate little armed army figures, so I got a kick out of that as well. I don't know how you can be a kid with toys like that and not think about somehow bringing them to life, because, your brain does 9/10 of that work, but if you can kind of get to the last bit on film or video, it's kind of fun. I also want to talk a little bit about your novel, The Janitor Must Die. Now, I haven't read it, but it sounds like a kind of a fun concoction. It's got some science fiction, maybe a little romance. Maybe just fill in the gaps for us and give us a bit of a better tease so people can know what they can expect.
All right. Well, as you said, the title is The Janitor Must Die, and the premise is it's about a janitor and a telekinetic girl who have to team up to get out of a lab filled with alien bugs. It's think Die Hard meets, the X-Files, or I like to compare it to Aliens, the 1986 James Cameron movie. But whenever I say that, nobody knows what I'm talking about, which I think is really sad.
That's a sin.
Yeah. And I remember, I think that the first time I thought of it, it was about 10 years ago, I think, was when I first thought of the premise. And the idea was just that I had, the superhero craze was really just starting. We felt like it had already been going on forever, but it really hadn't. We had no idea. There were already articles up going, when is the superhero going to craze be over? It's been going for like 2 years now.
Good luck.
And I remember thinking, I wanted to write a story that was about a normal guy in a world that was like that was crazy over the top. And so it's like Die Hard, but all the way up to the nth degree. It's him versus Cthulhu. It's him versus aliens and versus people with special powers and conspiracies, and it just went all the way up to cranked everything up to 11. And it's funny because I as I was studying to write that book, I ended up doing a lot more research into superheroes, and it ended up changing a little bit of how the story got written, because it's almost like superheroes are kind of on this continuum of fantasy literature. You can go from there, and then they have it, like comics have, and pulp all have this kind of link back. Like Batman is originally basically, he's basically Sam Spade with a funny hat.
Interesting.
Which is, I'm making it sound like superheroes had a lot more to do with this than it really does, because I ended up basically it went out in a similar way to Star Wars, where I was just taking touchstones from a lot of different action literature, but the commonality was that it was about a normal guy in an extraordinary situation.
And that's a great template, no matter what the elements are. So it's kind of like the fish out of water story. A lot of comedies do that, and often it works out really well. I was curious. Exactly. You're a right-of-center person, and you're a right-of-center artist. Does that come out in your work? Do you kind of make sure it doesn't? Do you think it can't help but be seen in some way? How do you kind of describe how the work that you do creatively sort of reflects that in any capacity?
I think that's another. It's almost the journey was a very interesting one, because I grew up in a very conservative household. But we ourselves, even just being homeschoolers, you know that everybody's different. Every homeschooling family is different, and every church you go to is different, and everything you go to, it's like when you actually go and are immersed in this culture, you can't help but notice that, you actually have a different way of doing things from everyone else. And that doesn't necessarily, some of it describes the truth and some of it describes a preference. And we had loads and loads of debates and things. And I remember thinking, you know what, this is great fun, but it's not art. Mm-hmm. It's not the same thing. It's almost like this is the mistake a lot of filmmakers make, like a lot of Christian themed film tends to make, is that they think of it as a sermon instead of a piece of they think of it as a sermon with illustrations.
Yeah,
and that's not art, as Andrew Klavan likes to say. Like I listen to him a lot, and what does he say? He says Christian art does not look the same as Christian life. And I think he makes a good point, because when you're describing something like a war, you're automatically describing things that are reprehensible. Most of the characters are going to do something bad over the course of that story. But to be honest, you have to tell that story. You have to tell all the parts of it. Or if you have a theme, if you have a theme, which especially when you're doing fantasy or something, or science fiction, you exclude certain things, but you only exclude them in alignment with a theme. You don't do it just because the audience wants you to. Yeah. Or because they won't like that or something. Because that's not what you. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
In general, I don't like to disagree with Andrew Klavan, so I think he's right here, and he's got a great approach to art where you got to listen, because he's been through those trenches and he knows what he's talking about, and he's got the sensitivity of an artist combined with an ideological soul, which you can really trust too. So I think that's really smart. Before we let you go, I have kind of a double-pronged question for you. As an artist, what are the biggest obstacles you face right now? And what are the things that really give you hope moving forward based on the work you've done so far? I
think the biggest thing is that keeping up with what people here as we come back to kind of the politics question it's not fun trying to figure out what people are willing to accept and what they won't be, when what are they going to be offended by. Like I just told you, I'm a Christian conservative. I was homeschooled as a kid. I'm about it like on paper, I'm as far over here as you can be, but the book I've written is easily a PG-13 book, and I don't mean just in terms of violence. It's got language in it. It's got references to sex in it. It's got all kinds of people doing terrible. I mean, it's not way out there, but it's a PG-13 movie, mm-hmm. And it's maybe even a high PG-13, just because I was like, well, I'm going to try and make it real because it's more fun that way.
Yeah.
And I went out of my way to make it. The thing about art is you just have to tell the truth. That was a thing that what am I thinking? Well, actually, there's a lot of quotes about truth, but anyway, that's about as close as I can get to it. It's just that I think in the end that's what the audience really wants, and that in the end, if you can get past the gatekeepers, there's a huge audience for that. I'm not worried about its popularity after we get past the gatekeepers. But before that, I've got to look at Twitter, and I look at Twitter and I cringe, and I look at Facebook and I cringe, and I look at YouTube and it goes, they flagged it as inappropriate for advertisers, and I'm like, the advertisers, they don't care.
Yeah.
Or, well, no, they do care, but I don't care what they think.
Yeah, the gatekeeper question is huge, but I think more and more people like yourself and other artists are getting around it, so that's a good thing. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us about this, John. I'll have a lot of the links on the website, HollywoodInToto.com, so you can check out John's YouTube channel, also his book, The Janitor Must Die. John, keep up the good work, and maybe we will touch base in a year or two and see what else you've been working on.
Fantastic. Sounds good.
I'm Patrick Corelchi.
And I'm Adriana Cortez, and we're the hosts of Red Pilled America, a new storytelling podcast.
Red Pilled America is not another talk show covering the day's news. We are all about telling stories. Stories Hollywood doesn't want you to hear. Stories the media mocks. Stories about everyday Americans that the elites ignore. You could think of Red Pilled America as audio documentaries, and we promise only one thing: the truth.
Visit the iHeartRadio app right now to listen to Red Pilled America.
My hit tip of the week is Fleabag. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is the title character. She smokes, she drinks, she cusses, and she breaks the fourth wall a lot, including when she's having sex. Now, don't abandon me now. Stick with me. Fleabag is a force of nature, and the jokes here are really funny. Both the physical gags and the verbal gags, it's just a real smart combination. But who is Fleabag anyway? And why does she turn to anonymous sex? Does she even have a moral compass? What's going on here? These are tough questions, but I've seen 4 episodes so far, and I'm not sure I know the answers, but I want to find out more. Now, Waller-Bridge is currently getting a lot of headlines because she's co-writing the new Bond film. She is an absolute revelation here. You can't take your eyes off her. Her comic timing is perfect, and I don't say that often. Now, yes, the material in Fleabag is bawdy and tough to watch at times, but for those who don't mind that kind of material, hoping for something really creative and fun and interesting, the rewards are well worth it. If you want to see Fleabag, the first 2 seasons are playing right now on Amazon Prime.
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
Joseph Granda once rubbed elbows with the likes of Tom Cruise, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and other acting icons. He was a young actor in the 1990s, making some noise in Hollywood, getting some work, but the business didn't really quite fit with him or his moral compass. He eventually left Hollywood for Colorado, of all places. And he figured his film days were in the proverbial rearview mirror. You know, it's time for new challenges, new directions. He became a dad. And then something changed. He still had the urge to create, and he wanted to do something else besides some artwork around his house. So he felt compelled to tell stories that spoke to his faith and his values that he wasn't seeing at Hollywood. He's doing that right now with his directorial debut, The Healing Garden. It's just one of several projects he's got in development, though, and I never bet against him. Now, for full disclosure's sake, Joseph's a really good friend of mine. I've kind of leaned on him a lot when working on Hollywood in Toto, working on this podcast, and he's also the voiceover artist at the beginning of each episode. I've loved watching him work outside the Hollywood system to share his art and his stories, and I think the best is really yet to come. I hope you'll enjoy his creative journey and what he has to say about Hollywood, faith-based movies, and much more. Here's my chat with Joseph Granda. Well, Joseph, a lot has changed since we last talked on this podcast a year or 2 ago. So I wanted to first start with some of the artwork you're creating right now. You've done a local show in the greater Colorado area, but let's dig down a little bit. Tell people the kind of work you're doing and the bigger picture, because obviously you're not just creating art for fluff's sake. You've got some intent behind it. What's going on in your mind, creatively speaking, from the artistic point of view?
Well, I think when it comes to sort of contemporary art that I do, it's really sort of fashionable to pick on a president when you're an artist, when it's the president you don't like. But I think that artists should give the finger to every president the moment they get into office to hold them accountable, whoever it may be. And so, you see in the art world right now, people, Trump balloons and golden Trump toilet. It's not interesting. But so, from a libertarian conservative perspective, I've taken on and I've done work. I'll give you an example. I have a work of art. It's a huge painting, and all of it is a red hat. And then it says red hat. And it's been interesting to see what people interpret that to be, because we live in a culture where people are afraid of the red hat, or they equate the red hat with Nazis, and it's really out there. So it's been interesting to see people ask me, well, what does that mean? I'm like, well, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. Which is the bigger question. Actually, I like art that has more room for interpretation. I just reviewed a new zombie comedy, The Dead Don't Die, and one of the main characters is wearing a Make America White Again hat. I'm thinking, well, that's pretty concrete. I don't think you can draw any other conclusions beyond, Trump's fans are racist, blah, blah, blah. But
right.
It's also boring.
Is that in that movie, the Jim Jarmusch movie?
It's literally in that movie.
That's just terrible. That's just like shooting yourself in the foot before the race.
Yeah.
Like, listen, I just want to be really clear on something. As artists, you should feel I support artists in doing whatever it is they want to do. There should be no censorship in art. But but you also have to know that when you're working with art and commerce, you have to know your audience. It's really important. And like, why would you disenfranchise so many people? Like, I have no interest in seeing that movie now. But Jim Jarmusch has every right to do that. But the thing is that that's not interesting. That's not an interesting perspective or an interesting angle. I mean, it's just throwing red meat to, the people that he hangs out with in Brooklyn, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think he actually prides himself on probably not making a lot of money with his movies, and he keeps creating them. But you're right. It's so obvious. I remember when Clinton was in office, the whole Clinton is Randy shtick was the kind of the go-to comedy card. Oh, look at him flirting with so-and-so. And it was kind of amusing at first, but then it got really dull really quickly. And I wasn't a fan of Clinton, and I'm not protecting Clinton, but by golly, isn't there a sort of a more interesting angle you could tackle than that? But it's what we're seeing with Trump today.
Well, and Clinton could never get elected today. If you took who he was, well, because of, look, for a guy who said that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare, Are you kidding me? He'd get run out of town for that.
Oh, yeah. Well, any 90s Democrat, I think, which is why Joe Biden is having some difficulties as we speak. Talk a little bit about some other – when you make art at this point, you want to provoke thought. You want to kind of be different. What are the motivations you find yourself feeling when you're in your studio working on something?
Well, what I like about art is that, people that complain about, their screenplays being changed or their movies being changed, those are all groups of people coming together. If you want to say something and do something without anybody changing it, then you should be painting or doing art of some sort. Yeah. I just want to provoke thought one way or the other. I don't want people to know I don't want to tell people what it is that they should think. Art is really just should be there to put a line around your thoughts. For example, I have some of my art is based on true experiences. I have here's what's interesting. So this one painting is called We Never Married, and it depicts 9/11, but it also has two pairs of two shoes, one red and one black. And on it says, after the second plane hit, she asked if she should wear the red shoe or the black shoe. And that's because I was living with a woman at the time. And when the second plane hit, I turned to her and I said, "Oh my God, another plane just hit the World Trade Center. This is not an accident." And she said, "Should I wear the black shoe or the red shoe?" And I knew at that moment that this relationship was over. Hence, We Never Married is the title. Uh-huh. But the gallery that it's hanging in is also to get there. You go through a coffee shop and whatnot. And she's like, "I love it, but I just don't know. This." I said, "I'll tell you what." So what I did was I hung an actual shower curtain in front of it, and then there's a warning sign that it may trigger you. And so now you have to willingly come up to this painting, move the curtain aside, view it, and then put it back. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see who's willing to engage themselves in that piece.
Yeah, actually, there was a movie. I think it might have been the "Can We Take a Joke" or maybe some other production I saw where they put up a very controversial play and they had trigger warnings all over the place, and people were still upset by it. So, but I love your approach. But sometimes the people who want to be offended will be offended no matter what happens. But I also want to talk about now. When you were in Hollywood, you were an actor. Mm-hmm. Now you're wearing multiple hats, and you're embarking on a new project called The Healing Garden. So I want to talk about that film, and maybe going to give us a quick intro on it, and I'm sure which will organically segue into why you're making it, because that's kind of the person you are.
Right. Well, I've had a couple films I've been trying to get made, and for all intents and purposes, they'll happen because they're strong. I've been, is the feedback that I've gotten. So this one came about really, I'm a person of faith, and I really think that it was brought on my plate to see if I was willing to do it. So I ran into this producer who had an idea, and she said, I have this much money to make this movie. And my first thought was like, well, I don't know if I can make a movie for that much money. But then I thought about, that story, sort of that parable or joke where the guy is up on his roof because his town is flooding, and he's praying to God, and a guy in a boat comes by and says, hey, come in the boat. I'll get you out of here. And he says, no, I've been praying, and God's going to take care of me. And so he keeps praying, and then a helicopter comes by and lowers in a bucket to bring him up. And he says, no, it's okay. I've been praying to God. He's going to help me out. And then, the flood reaches over his house, and he dies, and he ends up in heaven, and he gets there, and he says, God, how come you didn't help me? I was praying. And God's like, I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter. So I took this budget, and I said, you know what, let's kind of work backwards and take your idea. And as a writer, I will write this film basically based on the budget, which is not really how you do it, but it's worked out well. And I've been seeing some great actors. I've cast a guy named Redben Ramos, I actually wrote him into this, who's a wounded warrior. He lost a leg in Afghanistan. He's a Navy corpsman with the Marines. But the interesting thing right now with casting is so I get, these actors and whatnot, and they send me their reels, and I'll just give you one example, but it happened more than once. So this is a movie for grandma and grandpa to sit down and watch with their grandkids. It's a nice little movie. It's about a Vietnam vet who has lost his wife. He's lost his home. He has to move into a trailer park, and he's ready to die. He's ready to go. And he's trying to figure out what's his purpose, where he meets this sort of little disenfranchised girl in the neighborhood who kind of befriends him because her mother is in transition from the death of her husband, the loss of this child's father, and a new relationship. And so she bonds with this old Vietnam vet. And they go in this dystopian wasteland, and they plant a garden. And for each person in the mobile home park that has an ache or a pain or their spirit is down, they plant these seeds, and they pray over it for them to heal. And it's a really nice little story. And he tells her Bible stories as they're planting this garden. So the point is I watched actresses who their reels have. One of them had her. Having intercourse in a position where you can't see your partner.
That's in the reel?
Yeah, I mean it's clearly that's it, and she's talking, so maybe that's why it was in there. And then she's getting slapped around and beaten by a guy, and then she's firing a gun. But when I sent the script, she read the script, she was uncomfortable with the material because it was of a Christian faith. It's really bizarre. I didn't say anything. I was very respectful because artists should be able to pick and choose what they want to do.
Right.
But this was a good role. It was a good, wholesome role. Look, listen, again, artists should do whatever they want to do. But the culture is supposed to lift your thoughts and create beauty and stimulate you, So I just want to try and put some goodness into the world. That's all. I'm not saying anybody should do anything else. On this subject, what's really, really strange is that if you listen to talk radio during the day, like especially Rush Limbaugh, and I don't think this is regional, but all day long you hear these advertisements for erectile dysfunction medicines. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, but my guess is that the demographic that they're hitting is older, and that this is something that happens more often to older people. That's just my quick take. But what's your sense?
I understand that, but I'm not talking about the medicine. Next time you hear these, listen to the commercial. Listen, one of them says, the next time you're ready to go to war in the bedroom. Go to war in the bedroom?
That's romantic.
Last night Bill took me out, and finally, listen. First off, women don't talk that way. maybe in their 20s, but 40s and 50s, they don't like. Well, I really need Bill to like drop a mortar on me. You know what I mean? So here's my point. It's the continual sexualization of our culture through every channel that they can. That I'm supposed to be going to war in the bedroom. Mm-hmm. That kids should be first changing their sex through medicines, and then going off to have war in the wherever. It's disheartening.
Yeah, and also radio broadcasts are the ultimate. There's no barrier to entry. You don't have to subscribe. It's just turn it on and it's there. So even if that does hit the demographic target, there should be a way to kind of present it in a fashion that isn't exactly going to raise questions with your 8-year-old. But that is what it is. One of the things we've talked over the years about faith-based filmmaking and putting spirituality on the screen. And I think you have I guess the best way to say it is an atypical look at making those kinds of films. How will that be incorporated into the Healing Garden? Is this a chance to kind of really show your approach to this kind of particular genre?
Yeah, one of the things that I find, I'll give you an example. One of the producers was not on this project, but a different producer that had some ties to this. They wanted to hire only Christians. And my question to him was, if you're going to hire a plumber to fix your toilet, are you only going to hire a Christian, or are you going to hire the best plumber? So my worldview comes from that of a Christian. So my place in my faith and on this planet is to try and be salt and light amongst everybody. So my explanation to this person was, I just want to hire the best actors that are open to this material. Mm-hmm. I don't care. Listen, on my set, it doesn't matter who you love, what you do in your private life, who you voted for. Everyone is welcome there, because those are the teachings that I follow, mm-hmm. that everyone is welcome and everybody should be included. And the people who are, for lack of better words, maybe hostile to the material, they won't be there. So my point being is that to go out into the culture and be a part of it, not to stand over it and point my finger and go, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be saying that. It is what it is. But if we want to be accepted into the storytelling world of mainstream culture, we have to be willing to go inside and be a part of it with a different message.
Yeah, and there's always the chance that someone who is maybe not very spiritual in nature but willing to do a project like this, maybe he or she has changed a bit by making this movie, and maybe there's something enlightening about the process. So there's always that chance too. You worked as an actor, I guess in the 90s. Is that sort of the best time frame?
Yeah.
You were inside the beast, the belly of the beast, so to speak. Now, you're outside, but you're looking at it, and I think via social media and via the media, we can see things about Hollywood that maybe weren't possible during the golden age. How different is the industry now? Are the nuts and bolts the same, and maybe some window dressing is different, or do you see it changing in any significant ways?
When I think about the culture of Hollywood and how it's changed, it's become really nasty. And it leads. Look, here's what I think the mainstream Hollywood is. I think it's a religion. I think that global warming is its church, and I think abortion is its sacrament. For people to, Miley Cyrus to be licking a cake about abortion. First off, to claim that it's reproductive rights, abortion is not reproducing anything. So I think they've gone more and more to leaning against, listen, everybody needs to serve a master of some sort or something. They need to believe in something. And I think it's a self-congratulatory religion. And, right now their flag is a rainbow, and that's fine. That's fine. Somebody recently said the reason that they're not flying the rainbow flag on some of the embassies around the world is because you can't fly a religious flag on the same flagpole as the American flag because of the church separation of church and state. Mm-hmm. So it's just become nasty. It's become what they believe in. Yeah. And what they believe in is their storytelling and their sense of self.
And heaven help anyone who has views that are a little bit different. Look at Tim Allen. Tim Allen's being raked over the coals this week because he wasn't aware of a card game that is popular in black culture, and then they used that to connect to an older interview he said regarding the N-word, and where he said, well, if I don't have any racist feelings, why can't I use that in any capacity? Which is automatically deemed racist at 20. Like this whole circuitous way to say Tim Allen doesn't agree with our points of view completely. Let's get him. It's kind of shocking. You're making a movie in the Colorado area. There, we've seen Gosnell, we've seen FBI Lovebirds, where sort of creators are kind of working around the system. How hard is it for conservatives to do that? I mean, a fellow Maculaire is kind of a genius at the crowdfunding game, and he's a provocateur, and so I think he has some natural advantages. But if I'm Fred Smith and I've got a right-leaning story and I want to make a movie out of it, good luck, right? But what do you recommend for people who have those kinds of stories and they want to tell them? What do you do?
Well, first, you have to have a good story. And if you want to get a message out, the message gets heard in its subtlety, not in its sort of pastoral pounding of your message. And there's plenty of people out there that are interested in these points of views. I'll give you an example. In this film that I'm about to make, there's a character when this kid is going around to find out what ails everybody, and one of them says he's upset. And he says, "Listen, my back hurts." This is an old man. "My back hurts. My nose hairs keep growing, and Hollywood canceled the only comedy show on TV that starred a conservative." And he says that because there are hundreds of thousands of people in this country that feel that way. And when somebody wises up and gets brave enough to stand up against the Hollywood machine and say, I'm going to start a network, or I'm going to start a streaming service that has movies of redemption and patriotism unapologetically, they're going to make millions and millions of dollars. But so many people, like some of the rhinos out there in our government, are more concerned with being liked by a culture that will hate them no matter what they do, that they don't do it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Look at the John McCain situation. He went from he was the maverick to the guy who was Hitler-esque to the maverick again. And why? Because he agreed with the groupthink on the left, or he agreed with them some of the times, or he hit the GOP. And then when he kind of rejoined the GOP completely by running for office in the presidency, he became the villain again. So, I mean, you kind of saw the full arc of what the media and Hollywood will do to people if you get off the reservation and come back on.
To anybody out there who wants to make conservative movies or libertarian ideas or Christian movies, you cannot let the culture try and mold you, because they don't care about you. If you mold to their way, they just laugh their asses off, as Trump would say, behind doors. You have to stand up and just be who you are. And I'll tell you what, one of the best examples of this is Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow stands up and he says who he is, and he says what he believes in, and he refuses to change. And you know what? For the most part, the culture leaves him alone. The same way with Tucker Carlson. They tried to picket in front of his house, and he refuses to capitulate or to apologize for being who he is, because he knows, as Tim does in his heart, that they are not hateful people.
Yeah, the Tim Tebow example is interesting. And he's actually recently moved into the movie space. He just produced a film, and I'm going to guess he's going to produce some more. But the anger toward him, when you think about modern athletes and all the stuff they do that should be considered wrong by 99.9% of the population, and yet look at the heat that he faced for being gentle and quiet and loving and just in a very modest way revealing his faith. What could you possibly rail against him? But the sports writing community was very harsh against him. But I think they burned themselves out, which is a great point, that he stayed the course and rode out the wave, and he's all the better for it.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, I just laughed when people say, don't shove your religion down my throat. Like this whole month, you haven't been trying to put a rainbow down my throat. And you know what? People should love who they want. We live in a country where you are free to love and do what you want. And I respect that. But don't tell me that I can't have a different opinion of it. I work in the theater and the movie business. I have lots of gay friends that I love and I respect. I don't have to agree with everything that they do. They don't want to go to church with me, and I don't want to go to their parade. But they're at my house for dinner this Sunday, actually. Yeah. So that's where we need to meet and say, listen, we don't believe in the same thing, but we're all human. Let's get along.
Yeah. Seems simple, but it's subversive in 2019. Joseph, before we let you go, I know you got other projects you're working on, kind of at different stages, and I want to see if you just tease them a little bit. Maybe people will be intrigued by them, and I just like to hear about Joseph and I talk off podcast mic, and I always enjoy his projects, his pitches, his ideas. They're often clever, and I end up laughing a lot. Although I am laughing with you and your ideas, not at you ever. So, what's going on? What's sort of next in the lineup?
I'm all for people laughing at me too.
That's right.
That's okay. You got to live with it. We're way too sensitive in this world. Way too sensitive. It's not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah.
I got this movie, The Healing Garden. I got a solo art show opening this tonight. I have another film that's ready to go. It's called The Wilderness Pilot, about a soldier who crashes his plane in the remote wilderness only to discover that the least of his problems are his own survival. It's a story about where's your soul now and where's it going.
You're good at your elevator pitches, by the way.
What's that?
I said you're very good at your elevator pitches.
Oh, hey, people, you got to have your elevator pitch. I spent 15 years in Hollywood and 10 in New York City, so you got to have your elevator pitch, or no one's going to hear it.
Gotcha.
I've got a 5-part web series that I'm going to shoot after this movie called American Cheeses. And it's about a disenfranchised Jesuit priest who travels the country debunking bizarre miracles until he comes across one he can. So I've got a lot of things in the hopper. Unfortunately, most of those things need to have fun people that are willing to fund them. And, that's coming around. There's some great things happening here in Colorado. I know some guys that are putting together a film fund out of Colorado Springs to do redemptive and family films. What else?
There's a message here is that if you do see a crowdfunding effort toward a movie, toward something that is right of center, that is faith friendly, that agrees with your worldview, write that check. It doesn't have to be a big check. Support it. If you go to the movies, support films that echo your views as well. That's the message that's going to be sent to Hollywood, where they said, oh, The Passion of the Christ made how much money? Well, maybe we'll get in the faith-based game because looks like there's some scratch to be made. So
but the other thing too,
support those projects.
Yeah, and the thing about the Healing Garden that I'm doing right now, listen, I'm a white guy. I get nothing against white people.
Nor do
but I see all these movies that are of faith many times, and it's just the cast is uninteresting to me. So I have a very sort of the cast of this is very like they look like real people. Mm-hmm. They're not all shiny and blonde. And by the way, because Jesus was not shiny and blonde, he was a Middle Eastern guy. And in fact, we're going to use a black baby Jesus in this movie.
There you go.
Because there's a nativity scene that takes place.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of stuff going. The other thing that I'm hoping happens is I'm up for the job of writing the Coach McCartney story. And if you don't know who Coach McCartney was, Coach McCartney is the most winningest coach at CU here in Boulder, and he's also the founder of a Christian movement called Promise Keepers. Mm-hmm. So some of your audience will probably know that because a lot of times faith and conservative worldviews go together. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. Well, this is your second appearance on the HitCast. I'm looking forward to more. And Joseph, thank you for joining the show. Look out for The Healing Garden in production right now. You can find out more about the film, healinggardenmovie.com, or you could just visit josephgranda.com for everything you know about Joseph and his work. Of course, all the links to these items will be on the show notes page at hollywoodintoto.com. Joseph, love talking to you, and best of luck.
Thanks a lot.
Keep on creating, man.
All right. And let me just say, in the words of Tim Tebow, I just want to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
How dare you?
See if that's anybody in Hollywood cringe.
Well, hopefully no one about my podcasting, the powers that be will edit it out, but I think it's going to survive. Thanks again, Joseph.
Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.